Hey folks, this is Thomas and this is Word Along the Way, where we take biblical principles in context, bring it to our context so that we can journey well between purpose and destiny.
Hey, what's going on, folks? So again, this is the second time I'm on my mobile setup. Yesterday I was in South Carolina. Today we are in Tennessee, and so I needed to bring my a mobile setup to continue on or to pick up where we left off concerning the topic of positioning yourself according to purpose. We left off in the section where Naaman was just given the revelation of God for his healing through the prophet, and he went away. It was like a better, well, they are better words, so I won't say lack of better words, because when people say lack of better words, they always better words, and then they still say the word. But anyway, what I was going to say is he went away. The scripture points out he went away. Some versions say enrage. Some says, wrath. None of them say pissed off. None of them. But he went away pissed off. He was ticked. The fact that he came, made this trip to see the man of God, Elisha, and the man of God didn't even come to stand before his face or even to lay eyes on the guy. And that ticked him off. But he failed to realize that even though he did not know the God of Israel, the God of Israel still permitted the revelation to be given to him. He got a solution from the man of God for his healing, and yet he went away ticked. And in that situation, his purpose was to get healed, but he wasn't willing to posture himself to receive that healing. He wasn't willing to put himself in a position to fulfill the purpose. He allowed his outer circumstances, maybe his title or his role, or the people who were around him, to kind of save face, like how dare this guy not do X, Y, Z to me. He wasn't willing to humble himself. But we all find ourselves in that situation concerning with Naaman. We find ourselves, where we're just not willing to position ourselves according to the purpose of God. And God is not going to change his purpose. He's not going to change his purpose just because our position ain't right. He's like, okay, I'll wait. Or either we're gonna give this purpose to another. You're just gonna miss out. But we're gonna read in 2 Kings chapter 5 what transpired. And the beautiful thing about this is that the real focal character of this isn't necessarily Naaman. As far as when I was reading this and looking through it, it's not necessarily Naaman. It's actually a person who doesn't even get named. And we had one unnamed person so far, which was the slave girl or the young girl, what it talks about earlier in the chapter. But here we are. So Naaman has already come to where Elisha was. Elisha doesn't even come out. He just sends a message and say, this is the word that you give to Naaman for his healing. And that's it. He didn't mention to Naaman, like, you have to do something first, as far as in the sense you got to make a sacrifice, you got to give an offering, or you got to pay some kind of tribute. Nothing like that. He just tells the guy, go to this source of water, dip 7 times, and you'll be clean. Something so simple. So simple. The fact that at the moment Naaman heard it, he understood exactly what was being asked of him. Exactly. And so here we are. We're gonna get into it right here. So in I'll read verse 12, and then we get a running start from verse 12 to get to verse 13. So Naaman, and I'm gonna read actually verse 11, because Naaman in his pissed offedness, if that should be a term, we could say his pissed offedness, But Naaman became furious and went away and said, indeed, I said to myself, he will surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God and wave his hand over the place and heal the leprosy. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean? So he turned away. So he turned and went away in rage. And check this out. and his servants came near and spoke to him. Again, I said this before as far as like how sometimes in the scriptures, like, multiple people saying the same thing at the same time. Although I mentioned that just now, and this is not it, because I was looking at this and I was like, his servants, plural, came near, but the Hebrew word for that is ebed, and it doesn't necessarily mean a multitude of servants, and so because we're going to check out and see why I'm saying that. But he says, and his servants came near and spoke to him and said, check it, quote, my father, very singular, so the assumption is that this is a servant of his, one who is endeared to him, or one who's been loyal to him, or one who's, has a lot of respect for this guy. And this servant understands his place in the context of where he's at in the world concerning with Naaman. And he doesn't, we don't get a whole lot that's going on here, but the thing is that Naaman went away enraged, and we know how that is sometimes when you had a situation and you just appalled or frustrated or upset, and you got to go take a walk. And as you walking, you just vocalizing all of the wrongs that have been done and how things should have been and how you would have done things and how dare the person who did the thing to you shouldn't have, and going on. And sometimes that's you, and then sometimes you're the one who got to walk with that person, and many times it's not necessarily, it's not necessarily, egging them on. Many times people do when they feel in some kind of way, they call up the person or get with the person who they know going to egg them on and cheer them on in their wrongness. But this servant doesn't do that, and mainly believe it's out of respect, because he looks at Naaman as his master, and he doesn't put himself in a position where he's stepping out of that. And so he doesn't come at Naaman like, man, you dead wrong. You shouldn't even be acting like that, because he has to be mindful of his position with Naaman. But then he doesn't come and try to, I guess, inflate Naaman's wrongness. Like, you dead right, master. You always right. Everything you do is absolutely right. And that guy was totally wrong. You the best general in the world, and he should have can't. The servant didn't do any of that, because he understood his position. He understood his purpose. He's like, my goal is to serve you. My goal is to help you. My goal is to aid you. And in this context, we're going to see how that aid plays out. And so the servant of this general, he understood who he was. And he didn't go outside of that. And so it was like, whoever this important dude is, this important general, this guy, whoever this dude is, he understood that he's the dude who serves the dude. And this is much like, well, I say much like, kind of ain't like, but for the purpose of illustration, for me, it's a lot like this. And so, like in pool, I take it my perspective in pool, when you're trying to shoot, that's what they call taking the stick and, I guess, forcing it up against the ball. They call it shooting. And so in pool, the purpose when you shoot is to shoot certain balls in a hole in a certain sequence. And that's just depending on what type of game you're playing. If you're playing 8-ball, 9-ball, snooker, stuff like that. And the idea is to get the target ball into the hole or the pocket by making it collide with what we call the cue ball. And so first thing you understand is the purpose of the game. And so from wherever the ball lies on the table, the shooter has to position himself according to the purpose. You can't change anything on the table. You cannot change anything on the table. You can't tip the table over or anything. The table's not going to change. The purpose of the game is not going to change. You can't decide in 9-ball, in the middle of 9-ball, okay, now we're playing 8-ball. Or in the middle of 8-ball, let's throw a bunch of red balls on the table, now we're playing snookers. snookers. Yeah, you can't do that. You have to align yourself with the purpose of the game. And so in pool, the ideal is to try to get the balls in the hole. And you have to hit the cue ball against a target ball to get the ball in a hole or a pocket. And what happens in pool is wherever you have to hit the target ball in a hole, you have to align your whole body in relation to that purpose. And sometimes it looks super awkward. Sometimes it looks like, somebody leaning on the table with 1 foot off the ground, or leaning on the table with the cue stick behind their back. Sometimes it looks like, somebody getting almost down to the level of the table, like, they're looking up under a car trying to find something, squatting down, just trying to align themselves, their whole body, the whole head, the entire vision, parallel or in sync or in the same frequency, on the same line of travel with the purpose. And because the servant was faithful to his purpose, we're going to see how far-reaching the effects of that being obedient to the will of God resulted in. So let's check it out. In verse 13, and his servants came near. And again, we're understanding this servant is the Hebrew word abed, meaning servant or slave, in the singular. And he says, my father, very singular again, my father. And he speaks to him with this term of endearment, like, look, you my guy, you my dude, I love you, man. Like, and not to get all comical, but it could just look like, he came at this right. He's like, whatever they call it, general or whatever terms, he uses one where he's want to let this guy know, like, man, I love you. I'm for you. I am definitely for you. Please remember that. Please know that. And he uses this term of endearment. He says, my father. And if the prophet had told you to do something great, would you have not done it? And I mean, this just gets to the core, because he knows who he's speaking to. He's speaking to a general, a commander of an army. And he's like, man, you've done some great things. You've conquered, lands and kingdoms. You've made conquests, man. You organize troops in a successful way. You do great things. The king has put before you certain challenges, and you meet those challenges every time. He's like, you can do great stuff. And had this person ask you to do something great or complicated or challenging, like, would you not be up for that challenge? He's like, you the guy. So, I mean, the servant is, he's doing this in a very, very beautiful way, how he's going about it. Because in this mode of, like, using terms of endearment, he's also confirming, like, man, you're not just a run-of-the-mill guy. You can do stuff. Actually, you can do very difficult and hard stuff. So how much more are you able to do this simple thing? And let's read it. So he says, my father, if the prophet had told you to do something great, would you have not done it? I was just listening to the thunder crackling, rolling just now. And out here in Tennessee, I think there's a storm coming. It's a little drizzle we've been having. Well, I say we. I'm a visitor here. They've been having, but me by extension being here right now, I'm experiencing with them. Little signs of a thunderstorm may be rolling in. And last night, one of the hosts to this event that we had, one of the hosts was like, maybe, depending on the weather tomorrow, because this was last night. So depending on the weather tomorrow, they probably have to move certain events inside, depending on, if a tornado comes, and we kind of like, whoa, tornado, where we're from, South Carolina, we get hurricanes. And I mean, with hurricanes, you get weeks notice of, like, okay, this thing is brewing out on the ocean. It looks to, be tracking this way. And, so you can plan, but tornado drop out of the sky in a moment. I mean, no plans, and so we're like, whoa, wait a minute. We don't know how to respond to this. But anyway, that was just on. If you can hear it in the background, if you can hear it in the background, you might not even heard that in the background. My mic might be good enough to where it just canceled that out. I don't know. But if you heard it, that's where we at. I'm out at this homestead, just sitting on the porch right now, and the scene is a beautiful scene, and just kind of enjoying the landscape. It's real nice, real nice. Nice rainy day out, kind of out on the farm or the homestead environment. Actually, it's a really beautiful scene. I'm gonna tell y'all about it. I'm sitting on this porch. It's like a wooden deck porch, but then they have this little I don't call it cubby area, but it's a little offshoot on the porch, and it has these two beautiful white wooden benches, swing benches with the big corded rope, like you say, corded rope, and it has the nice ambient light out here, so it's a real beautiful scene, and I'm looking out on in the yard of or the property of the wooden fence, and then beyond the wooden fence you can see certain trees starting to blossom. I don't know what those are. They got like white flowers. I don't say white flowers. Yeah, white flowers on them, and it's just beautiful. So I probably did a horrible job in explaining what I'm looking at, but that was the whole deal of just hearing the thunder roll. It was like, okay. But anyway, getting back to verse 13. And his servants came near and spoke to him and said, My father, if the prophet had told you to do something great, would you have not done it? All right, so verse 13. And the servant came near and spoke to him and said, My father, if the prophet had told you to do something great, would you have not done it? How much more then when he says to you, look how simple this is, wash and be clean. And the servant is good what he did, because I mean, I would probably have said that in like I'll say in a, I guess I would be honest in like a condescending kind of like strange way. I probably would have made it awkward. Like the prophet only he said wash and be clean. It's like, you know how to wash, right? You do wash, right? You've done that before, correct? I assume that you have taken, how to take care of your hygiene. One of the simplest things, you know, I say the simplest things for able-bodied person. For others it might be a little difficult, who have certain limitations. But just for an able-bodied person to take care of your personal hygiene is the most simplest or immediate thing to do, because it is you. And scripture points that out as far as concerning the situation with how a husband ought to love his wife and take care of his wife. It's like, your wife is part of your own body. How can you, who, you know how to take care of your own body, not take care of your wife? It's like a simple thing to do as far as the taking care of the body part. It's like kind of one of those default things that you assume everybody does that. Everybody knows how to wash. And so he's like, the guy only said like wash and be clean. He's like the king of Syria never gave you a mission like that. He's never, came to you and had a big meeting and said, okay, General, call all your troops. I have an important mission for you. This is one like no other. And then, you do the drum roll and everybody waits for whatever this mission is. And he says, go home and wash. That would never happen. Never happen. And so the servant is like, this is what he says. He's like, the guy only said wash and be clean. He's like, how simple is that? How easy is that for you to do? The servant is also like, that wasn't a complicated mission, because I even understand the mission. And then you understood the mission, because that's why you kind of ticked off right now. And they're not a whole lot of words the servant has said. He's simply, I'll say divinely, stated a term of endearment, also confirmed the ability or capability of the general. He didn't minimize that. And then he highlights the simplicity and ease of the mission that's put before him. And check this out. After this servant steps into this position, moves his whole framework, into the purposes he's been given of being a help to this general, after he says, wash and be clean, if this was like the Gospel of Mark, we would see immediately right after that, because Mark loves to use immediately, but that's what we see. We don't see no back and forth with Naaman in the sermon of this conversation or debate going on. So verse 14, so he went down and dipped 7 times in the Jordan. He did exactly what he heard the prophet said. He knew what he said. It was so simple that he did not forget it. And however long this time frame is, he did not forget. He knew exactly what he was purposed to do. And so it says in verse 14, so he went down and dipped 7 times in the Jordan, according to the saying of the man of God. And his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. So again, it is, I'm just thinking for like Naaman, something so simple for him to do, and such a great outcome of him doing a simple thing. We'd have to take in mind that what's happening to this guy is like he was a leper. Now, I don't know the culture of the Syrians, concerning that, but in Israel, you kind of get ostracized for being a leper. I'm pretty sure as a general, having to be before people, having to show this image of, what is the word called, of conqueror or being victorious or triumphant over all things, and then to have this physical ailment that's obvious to everybody. It's almost like it could be taken as a sign of weakness or a sign of vulnerability. Excuse me. And I assume that that could definitely play into the psyche of the general. Like, man, here I am commanding many people. I need to look apart. I need to be professional. And here it is. My whole flesh is falling apart on me. Here it is in this moment. He's done the simple thing, and now he is clean. His physical body has been transformed. No enchantments, no special smoke, no magic tricks at all. He just simply responded to the revelation of God. That's what he did. He simply responded to the revelation of God, because like we said in the last episode, what wasn't withheld from him is like when he made the trip from Syria to Samaria, there wasn't an in-between of like, well, you got to do these certain things and then God is going to reveal something to you. It's like he came to the house where the prophet was, and immediately the revelation of God for his situation came to him immediately. And he was given a decision or an opportunity. This is the purpose that you've come for. This is the solution. This is my purpose for your life in this situation. Now you must position yourself rightly for that. His first position was way wrong. He went out enraged, ticked off, and voicing his opinion, and not willing to do it, and pointing out all kind of other reasons, pointing out all kind of reasons or excuses why he shouldn't do it, because the man of God didn't do this a certain way, and he didn't come out, he didn't wave his hand, he didn't say something special, or why did he pick Jordan? He could have picked this river, that river. He could have picked all of these other sources that are better. He had all these excuses, and his position, his posturing was just wrong. And then the whole time his posture was wrong, guess what? He still had leprosy. His excuses, his bad posture, none of that helped the situation at all. God wasn't like, oh man, you're really taking this, rough, I might just need to change what I thought I was going to do, and then let's do something else. Let's just, heal your situation anyway. No, the guy is still there. He's still ticked off, still complaining about all of the things that he thought should have been done, such as the guy should have waved his hand, or the guy should have said, a certain channel. He should have told him a better water source. He didn't do any of that. And yet he's still standing there. So still at this point, walking there with the same ailment that he came with. God did not change his plan according to Naaman. And we see that here, that what he had to do is change his posture. Anyway, when we look at this, he got to this point where he had to get in the water. Now, at some point, all of that stuff becomes irrelevant. Nobody cares of how many medals you got, or what color your uniform is, or what your beret look like if they had a beret, or your helmet looks like, or the branding that's on your shield, or the decoration on your sword, or whatever kind of thing had going on. None of that mattered. All he had to do was have an encounter personally with the assignment God gave him to do, and he had to get down in the water. And the way it puts out, we don't, not knowing what that particular area of the Jordan looked like, but he had an idea that there are certain waters that are better fit, that might, I don't know, look cleaner. But regardless of that preference, he had to come to a point like, I am going to humble myself and set aside my preference, set aside my opinion, set aside my ranking or my position, and I am going to posture myself in line with the purpose that God has put before me. And we see that in verse 14. So he went down and dipped 7 times in the Jordan, according to the saying of the man of God, and his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. Now check this out, because here it is, it just reads in one sentence, he was made clean, but there's been a major transformation taking place in this guy's life. He has come to, I guess, an opposing nation and come to their prophet. In parts, he might not really believe in the whole God thing or the whole Israelite God thing. And so he's crossing a very, very large plane of territory. And I'm not talking geographically, I'm just talking psychologically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, all of those things, that he's come to this place to receive change. And at this point, he has received it. From the journey he's made, he has now been transformed, but has now been made different. There's no more leprosy in his makeup at all. He's now been restored. Whatever that does on the official front or their ceremonial front, as far as when they're before the king or the armies or the militaries or before the people, or how that makes him appear professionally. And he's been restored. All of that has been given back to him. And none of that would have happened had he kept his original posture. Had he not positioned himself according to the purpose that the Lord had put, he would have gone back wherever he came from the same, unchanged, untransformed, and still a leper. Now, what we're going to do is get into some more of this, because this next part is an interesting encounter that happens when he comes back to the prophet. And there are a few other players involved. But here it is, we see that all of these things have happened because of one servant, an unnamed servant, who knew his purpose, and he positioned himself correctly according to his purpose. And that small encounter that he had with his general, that moment of time he had with his general, used rightly, has changed the course of the general's life, both physically and, we're going to see later on spiritually. And this is how it is for the believer. When we align our whole body, our whole mind, our whole vision, our whole words, our whole hearing according to the purpose of God. And you see many times through scripture that a lot of these occurrences or these marvelous illustrations of practical, functional faith, you see it. And many times we get in the record, concerning the scriptures, we get people like David, Nehemiah, Ezra, Joshua, Moses, Elijah, Elisha, Ezekiel, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Deborah, Abigail, Rahab, and so on. You have a lot of instances where certain people knew their purpose. They aligned themselves or positioned themselves according to purpose and fulfilled it. And they're recorded in scripture by name. Then you have others who have been written down in the scriptures with no names at all. People who go unnamed through history, but yet their example, their legacy lives on. Their legacy still lives on because they live their life according to purpose. They position their life according to purpose. Yeah, you got people like the widow. That's all concerning the prophet Elijah. That's all you got. It's the widow. You have the servant or the slave of Abraham. That's all we had in the record concerning when Abraham was seeking a wife for his son Isaac. That was the servant was the main character in that thing. And that's all we have is the servant of Abraham. No name at all. Then you have the servant of Naaman. You have the lady with the issue of blood. You have the Satirian. You have many people who are named according to a description only. That's it. We don't get any identifying factors concerning their name. Just what or who they are, like what they are, their title. And then you have people like the woman at the well. It's interesting how the Bible highlights these unnamed people in such like a subtle way, but like you take a look at those narratives and there are big things that happen with unnamed people involved. The woman at the well, she was responsible for spreading this news about Jesus to her whole town. And then all we get is, woman at the well. That's it. But imagine if me, we align our life, align our body, our whole being up according to purpose. Imagine what effect, what impact that could have. We could be like the servant concerning Naaman. Technically unnamed, but yet go down in history for generations and generations to come as an example of living, positioning ourselves according to purpose. And this is where we find ourselves at, on a journey between purpose and destiny. I'm Thomas, and this is Word Along the Way. God bless you.